As I recollect my growing up in various states, I have a lot of treasured memories, no doubt. Many of them with my dad as we went out and traipsed around the country, went hunting together. Just treasured memories, love them. One of them, actually two of them, are as follows. When I got my first .22 rifle, totally dug that moment. It was a Ruger 10/22, and guess what? Still own it. It's right over there. I'll show it to you here in a second. And secondly, when I got my first scope. And also, guess what? This is it. That's right. I've held on to this scope over the years and have put it into service on a number of different .22 rifles, and it still serves well. This is a Bushnell 3x7 called a custom .22 scope in gloss black finish, 18mm objective, and it has a very optimistic bullet drop compensator on it, which I think is funny for a .22 long rifle. But here it is. You can turn the dials, and all you're doing is turning the elevation adjustment, of course. Came with .22 Magnum dials. I think I've long lost that one, and now rides on it the .22 long rifle dial. And I remember years of me being out in the desert and trying to connect with rounds off in the distance, 150 yards away, trying to use this BDC system on this little scope. And back then, I'll tell you, I loved the scope. I didn't know any better. And back in the 70s and early 1980s, indeed, it was a good scope. I mean, it was decent. And it also had an integrated, still does, has that integrated attachment system, which I really like. I don't know why they don't do that more often for dedicated .22 rifle scopes. I think that's a good idea. But I'll tell you, time has marched on, and thankfully, this is no longer the reference for a good .22 rifle scope. Still decent, as you can see. It definitely is going to keep serving in the Nutnfancy household as it's trained my boys how to shoot with optical sights. Now, let me just do a little aside here. I do not think that you should teach your boys or your daughters initially on optical sights. I think they need to learn how to shoot iron sights. And what you're looking at, this rifle is a .22 single shot chipmunk rifle. Great training tool, and I've used it for over a decade training my boys how to shoot and to make their rounds count. And after they mastered the art of trigger pull, sight picture, and all the other marksmanship fundamentals that go into connecting with your target, then and only then do I allow them to have the luxury of an optical sight. Yes, even this little tiny one, the 2x7 Bushnell. And since it is still a very lightweight, slim scope, it fits perfectly on this little chipmunk. And both of my boys now know how to shoot iron sights effectively, so I've just left it on. But going back a ways, here's that 10/22 I've shown you, and I'm going to use it to introduce the actual topic of this conversation. This is an original 10/22 dated 1976. And yeah, this was one of those red letter dates that I remember is when my dad and I went to the best product store in Virginia and bought this gun. And man, it has had a lot of rounds through it. A lot of rounds. Actually, riding on top of this original 10/22 is not the scope that I'm going to tell you about, but it is another excellent scope. This is a Beaman 2x7 power blue ribbon scope. I do not think they make this exact scope anymore. They might make a variation of it, and it has a lot to offer. It's an excellent .22 scope, except for a few things. Let me talk about the good things, and then I'm going to talk about maybe the not so good things. The good things are, and this is what I really like about having in today's .22 scopes, and that is an adjustable objective. What that means, guys, if you don't know, is that you can focus with a scope to various ranges. All you do is twist, in this model, the objective bell, and you can focus the entire sight picture, if you will, to the range you're shooting at. The reason that's important for me, and your mileage may vary, is because I do a lot of different shooting games with my buddies. Some of them are indoors, as you've seen in that indoor shooting vid I made. And those targets are around 33 feet. So this little Bushnell scope, the classic custom I showed you, there's no way it could serve in that capacity. No way. It just can't focus that closely. And also the sight picture on this scope is very dim. It only has an 18mm objective. When we crank up the magnification from 3 power, maybe going to 4 or more, we're going to dim that image as we reduce our exit pupil, i.e. the amount of light that reaches our eye. And that always is the case when we increase the magnification on our scopes, on our binoculars, whatnot. Back to the blue ribbon scope, the Beaman one, adjustable objective. That's a huge plus in both airgun scopes and 22 scopes. And truth be told, this is an airgun scope and has served on top of our family's Beaman R9 for a number of years, killing lots of critters in the process and pests. Great scope. Nice, easy dials that have repeatable settings on it. Love that. This has an interesting feature that has an illuminated reticle. Riding in there right now is a fiber optic light transmitting dome that illuminates I'm not going to show you the crosshairs in orange. And you can also screw on a little battery powered module that does the same. That's a big plus. The magnification range is okay, 2 to 7 power. I think that's adequate for a 22 scope. And the quality of build is outstanding, as are the optics as well. They're fully multi-coated optics, nitrogen sealed, all the good stuff we've come to expect from our optics. How about the bad things? One, the Beaman Blue Ribbon was a very expensive scope for its time, and also it's pretty heavy. I think around 18.5 ounces. I don't have an exact weight. So those are a few downsides. But it was a huge leap in quality and capability from this style of 22 rimfire scope. And yes, it's designed mainly for an air gun, but it serves very well on top of 22s, as you can see, as long as you can take the weight and the cost. However, I don't think that one's being made. Now to the real topic of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to turn you on to the scope that I think is a high value, super quality option to scope your 22s and heck, any other gun you're looking at. Let me start first by saying that I'm a big fan of value. At the Nutnfancy Project, you guys have probably picked up on that. I don't review just high-end stuff. And the reason for that, and it's pretty simple really, is you have to stretch your gear dollars. I mean, you've got maybe some rifles, ammunition, reloading components, camouflage, optics, radios, survival supplies, knives, all of which that hopefully you can stock your systems, whatever those systems may be. It takes a lot of money. I don't know about you, but I don't have money to go out and drop 6 bills, maybe 8 bills on a scope for the rifles I have, and even my friends are the same way. So what I look for is high value optics that still provide a lot of optical quality, high quality construction, lightweight, and compactness. And boom, here it is. This is the Weaver 3x9 rimfire special scope, and it's riding on top of a Marlin 795 semi-automatic 22 rifle. Great gun. And I'll tell you, that's a great scope. And now we're talking a multi-generational leap between this scope and that scope, and this one is still relatively affordable. Let me go over the specifications with you on this Weaver 3x9. It's called an RV9, by the way, and I truly believe it's probably the best all-around 22 rifle scope on the market as of today, and that's 2009. Now, Leupold makes one very similar, and I think they came out with it after the RV9, and they did it to compete with this model. First off, let's talk the weight. It is very light. It's 12 ounces, and compared to that blue ribbon Beaman scope I just showed you, you're going to lose 6.5 ounces. That allows a very light 22 rifle like this Marlin 795 to, guess what, stay light, stay portable. That Beaman riding on top of that 1022 actually changes the whole feel of the gun. Because it's kind of a chunky and heavy scope, no longer is this particular 1022 light in hand. It kind of slows down. It's slower to point, harder to carry over extended distances. Trust me, been there, done it. But the RV9 allows you to keep your gun light while retaining some very impressive optical capabilities. It is a 3x9 22 rifle scope. It is purpose built for 22s, and that's a pretty good optical range, better than the 2x7s I just showed you. I love that, especially when we're doing some, informal competitive shooting, my buds and I, And it's got that adjustable objective out front. Just like I showed you on the Beaman, this one can focus to different ranges. So you have a very focused sight picture. But also watch this. If you go out and buy an adjustable objective scope, guys, make sure it focuses to at least 10 yards or a minimum of 10 yards, because a lot of the shooting we do is close range, and most adjustable objective scopes don't do that. They'll only focus to, 30 yards. Just depends on the model. And that's because it takes, some adjustment of the optical elements to achieve that. Now, I'll join those clips. Sorry, battery died. I know that I have to rotate my objective in order to dial in my preferred focus distance. And if I have to, I can remove that Butler Creek scope cap. So just keep that in mind. So adjustable objective down to 10 yards, 10 meters. That's awesome. No adjustable dials, but you know what? In a 22, I don't really care. And what I'm talking about is target style dials that I can manipulate without taking my scope caps off. The RV9 lacks those, but it's a 22 scope, and I don't very often make adjustments to them. If I had my choice, I would like them, maybe some low profile target dials, but it's not a showstopper not to have them. The overall length on the RV9, very compact for what it does. 11 inches, just slightly over 11 inches. Now, I told you about that Leupold. They have a model very similar to this one. However, it's $100 more. And that, again, speaks to another big selling point, kind of what I made reference to of the RV9. At SWFA, this is the printout I did. Here's the RV9 scope, and they're selling it for $199. I've seen it for as low as $180. But I will tell you right now, it is a hard scope to find. You're not going to find this scope readily. It's kind of tough to find. That's just the way it is. Something else to consider when you're looking at scopes, not just 22 scopes, all scopes, is eye relief. Eye relief is how far or how close your eye has to be to see the visual image coming through the scope. I prefer non-critical eye relief. In other words, something that gives me a range where my big old eyeball has to be in order to see the image. And in the RV9 by Weaver, it's not super generous, but at least there's something there, and it's non-critical. It's 3.7 inches to 3.3 inches where your eyeball has to be, and you can see through the scope. Now, the Leupold offering, I forget the name of it. I think it's a VariX2 EFR 3x9 for 22 rimfires as well, is pretty much identical to the Weaver RV9. However, like I said, I may have said, may not have, it is $100 more. It is super lightweight, as are many of the Leupold scopes. I think it weighs around 11 ounces, 11 and a half. It's actually even lighter than the Weaver. Great scope. However, it does possess critical eye relief, i.e., I think they need 3.3 inches on that Leupold. So, not so great. I actually believe that the Weaver RV9 beats, yes, even the Leupold. Now, I know a lot of you guys are saying, well, what about image quality? I'm very happy and have been very happy with the image quality on the RV9. And I've used them for years. Now, that's not to say that it is to maybe Leupold levels. The image is bright, especially when you go to 9 power and we reduce that exit pupil like I was talking about earlier. Reduce the amount of light being transmitted through the scope. That's the real test of clarity and the quality of the optical elements in the scope. And I truly believe that the RV9 holds its own against a lot of more expensive scopes. Yes, even the Leupold. I haven't compared the Leupold side by side with the Weaver, and I suspect that it might be just a little bit better in optical quality. However, to be honest, it's not going to matter that much on a 22 rifle. And I really think that this is an excellent, excellent scope for the money. Even before the Nutnfancy project, I will tell you I've sold just a few of these scopes to my friends, and I'm just talking about through recommendations. And here's another one going to my friend. And let's take a look at what you get. There's the Weaver box, and Weaver, of course, is a very storied name going way back. It's changed owners several times. I believe the company Blount owns it right now. Could be wrong, doesn't matter. The good news is they're still making Weaver scopes. That's very good because it's a high value, high quality scope for what you're getting. There's your model number, 849398, 3x9 by 32 millimeter objective, and this side's open. Adjustable objective, you know it. That's the hugest thing that I like on my 22 scopes. And let me just do an aside right here. Here's the Weaver catalog going back a couple years. I'll show you another excellent scope if you decide you don't need an adjustable objective. Here's their rimfire page from a few years back. There's the RV7, and that comes in both matte and gloss finishes. That is an excellent 22 scope right there, the RV7. You saw it riding on top of the Marlin Papoose, which I reviewed. And then this one is, what's that called? The R4. That's a straight 4-power. And actually, I'm mistaken. That's the one that was riding on top of the Marlin Papoose. And I think I have that on top of a different gun. You may see it in the Nutnfancy project. Both of them, excellent 22 scopes. That's a straight 4-power, 2x7. No adjustable objective here, though, on either model. And the RV9 is a step above both of these. You do gain a little bit in length, a little bit in weight, but you get that capability, kind of a competition capability to shoot at short ranges. And there's your scope as it comes. And you will be struck by how lightweight that RV9 is. And it will not change the fine handling and balance of your gun. So yeah, scopes have come a long ways, baby, and you get a lot for your money. I highly recommend, however, you stay away from no-name scopes. And as I talked about in my binocular review, price is a very good indicator of quality. If you find a scope for around $60, $50, don't expect it to be to the quality level of even a Weaver RV9. It just isn't. There's several BSA scopes that fall into that category. And let me just also say that several users will be happy with that. And I've used those types of scopes on my air guns, on different guns as well. And they provide, for me, kind of adequate performance. And I say kind of because, honestly, the optical quality on those cheap scopes is distracting to me. It's so bad when I go to the higher magnification ranges that it just makes shooting unpleasant for me. I don't think you'll have that problem with a Weaver RV9. You just won't. It's a very clear scope for what it is and the price level, and you could surely spend a heck of a lot more money and only get maybe a marginal improvement in the optics. So there you have it. This is my top recommended scope. I sure wish I had it back in the 1970s, but I'll tell you what, that little Bushnell served me well, and it's still serving, just not to the level of a super quality, high value scope like the Weaver RV9. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Nutnfancy. I want to turn you on to this scope and more optics reviews coming. Just the select ones that I think merit your attention. We'll see ya.